Welcome to the Self Careapist Podcast. Join me, Lorain, a licensed psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, and EMDR consultant, along with expert guests as we explore the approaches and modalities we've used and developed to support our clients' success. Our conversations and stories are designed to inspire new and seasoned clinicians to stay curious, prioritize self-care, and never stop learning. Hi, this is Lorain Moorhead, and welcome to the second solo episode of the Self Careapist Podcast on the last day of the year, and it will be the last episode of the year. So what I thought would be fun is if we captured some of the great quotations and ideas that have shown up on the Self Careapist Podcast this year. I knew it was going to be fun to talk to subject matter experts, researchers, authors, psychologists, and therapists in the field. And an added bonus has been that I've gotten to deep dive into the self-care ideas and rituals of so many interesting people. So I wanted to just take a minute as this holiday season and the year are coming to an end. I thought that this would be a great time to kind of look further into some of the trends that all of these great minds have shared this year regarding self-care. And I think that self-care is certainly different for everyone. That's going to be one of the major points that we talk about today. I'm hoping it will inspire all of us to explore a little bit more of an individualized self-care plan as we head into the new year. So I'll start with something that guest Dr. Brinen shared. So he has a psychosis recovery model that blends recovery, behavioral activation, and meaningful engagement. And one of the major ideas that he has, if you attune to that episode, I'll link all these episodes in the show notes as well. But in his episode, he talks a lot about the importance of activity. He encourages activity tracking among his clients that he works with around the issues of psychosis and OCD. And he says that that's a major component of recovery. And he says, if you talk half as much as you do, then you'll be okay.
That it could be mood, it could be energy, it could be any of these things. It could be voices, it could be any of those worries, right? All of these things falter around activity. They really revolve around activity. You know, if you kind of look across, and the good news is I've kind of looked at them. You guys don't have to go and do it. But if you look across, like so many of the interventions, they're really highly effective, meaning that like we've studied them scientifically and we've seen that they really work. The highly effective interventions that we have for psychosis, so many of them revolve around, they start with this idea of increasing activity. Right, increasing what you're doing. And there's a version of like activity scheduling.
This is really important to consider because I believe that oftentimes when we think of self-care, we think of a relaxed state. And as you'll see, as we kind of get into the different conversations that we've had this year, certainly relaxing is important. And I think knowing that there can be different types of self-care where some can be more mobile and active and some can be more internal processes, we find that a combination of the two and knowing what to use when and what you can pull from can be the most helpful approach of all. So my episode with Dr. Marnie Feuerman, side note on that episode, it's a great one if you haven't heard it. She compares and contrasts two couples-oriented models of therapy, EFT and the Gottman approach. She's extensively trained in both, so she's able to really speak to when and where she's using either model. But I've had people approach me after hearing that episode saying it was able to inspire them to seek out a healthier relationship that they're now in. So I think that is a great testament to her, of course, and that episode. So she reminds us that it's not necessarily enough to schedule a trip to the spa or for a massage, because Self-care really involves changing your mindset. This theme comes up over and over where people will say, not saying that it's bad to do things that help you care for yourself on the outside, getting our hair done, etc. But it really is important to also dial into your own unique internal process. I think that is a great thing that we're also wanting to remind our clients that self-care really is an ongoing process. My personal take is that we really need to attune to what works for us and really be aware of times when we felt truly cared for and what we were tapping into. I think sometimes we're doing slow, solitary wind down efforts, and sometimes it can be more of an active self-care effort. And even if you're doing something that feels slow and maybe you've got your feet up and you're watching TV, for some people you might leave that and not feel fully relaxed. I think some people need to be using their hands more, be wanting to do crafts, wanting to do a puzzle, just doing something like that. And then we'll talk a lot more about the different skills and ways to gauge what emotional and mental techniques are working to promote a full body relaxation as well. Just like in athletics, you hear trainers and experts talk about an active recovery. I think sometimes self-care can look like that too, where you're doing something, you're not doing nothing, you're actually putting in a little bit of effort, even if your feet are kicked up, to help your mind and body fully relax. It really is individualized and whatever works for you. In my previous solo episode, I talk a little bit about the framework that I think about when I'm helping someone explore what their really attuned self-care might look like. And I think that's important to mention too. Another aspect of self-care is how much community, how much conversation, how much peopling to incorporate. The episode with Doctors Atwood and Garnett recently did a really neat job of highlighting that even that can look different and individualized depending on the person. You might find that you're doing an activity together with someone and you feel really relaxed at the end, but it didn't involve a lot of talking and processing.
There's an expectation of a reciprocal conversation. But what you may get is sitting beside each other, drawing, but in silence. Sense, connection. They don't have to be talking, but there is just something that's going on between them. And at the end, they may compliment each other on the drawings and off they go. But they actually had a really good connection at that time.
Of course, we know some people really enjoy a really deep conversation where they're learning a lot. I'm one of those people. That feels really relaxing to me to have and be exposed to new ideas, new research, new applications, things I've never thought of before. Like that is the best feeling for me. And I know that a lot of people who enjoy podcasts probably are similar, and you might even be relating to that with me right now. Some people like just to see a lot of faces, get to be exposed to a lot of different, sometimes quicker conversations. And that is okay too. I think it's just a matter of figuring out what you like and making opportunities for more of that. Along the lines of that, I think sometimes we don't really immerse ourselves in a self-care practice because we don't feel like we have enough time to do it. And Dr. Liz Mackingvale, who came on to talk about OCD, cited some work by Dr. Bruce Perry. And she says that according to him, regulation only takes about 2 minutes. And so you can incorporate a lot of good self-care just by making time to schedule in 2 minutes when you have it.
I think a lot of us have this belief that, oh, self-care means I need to go spend like 5 hours at the spa or like all day hiking or, not necessarily, right? Regulation can be taking a 2-minute break that you just go on a quick walk or you listen to music, right? Or you do something to get kind of your circadian rhythm, but like rhythm and different things can allow an increased regulation. Movement, steps can be a big part of that. And so for me, self-care is a little bit here and there, right?
She did mention that a walk or taking some steps can help with that. I think movement is really fun and a great self-care technique for a lot of people, and we don't necessarily have time for it in our days with all of our other obligations. But I am brainstorming a fun self-care movement project for the new year, so stay tuned for that. I loved the conversation I got to have with Paris Goodyear Brown for a lot of reasons. I've admired and enjoyed her work for a long, long time. And she talked about a visualization exercise that she does. It involves imagining the trauma that she has just heard secondhand being removed from her body. And she also said that she gets to know the different self-care practices and preferences for people on her team, and she'll make space for them to do those in between clients, especially if she knows they've just had a really heavy session.
Well, because I just feel so blessed to have 10 different treatment rooms at Nurture House. So there's all kinds of tools that therapists can use, and we story keep for each other in the building. So when I see a clinician who is coming out of a trauma session just covered in the trauma, their shoulders are down, they look like they're exhausted or heavy, they've really been holding deeply for a child or parent, I get to know what works for them and then offer that to them. So let's say her name is Betty. I would be, hey, Betty, can you just go take a couple minutes and jump on the jumperoo outside, like discharge that trauma energy before you go into your next session? And for me, my staff knows that what I will do is when I'm feeling over full with the trauma I've been holding for a client, I will go and lay down on the marble floor of our staff room, laid out entirely, and then imagine the trauma as like brown goo being leached from my body into the cool marble floor.
It's important to note that her office has a lot of these options because they see kids and it's in a home-like setting. So they have some different things that the clinicians can also use as they're seeing clients throughout the day. So I thought that was a really important consideration too, that, the culture of our offices can really be set by the people in it. If the person who is in charge is taking time to do self-care and incorporate that throughout the day, then it can be a practice that's really implemented by other team members as well. I think that's such a great thing to consider for the modeling that we're doing, not only with our clients, but also for our supervisees, teammates, newer people that are coming on, interns, to see that self-care, we're building it in throughout the day, I think is a really neat thing to be observed by all the people that we interface with. Dr. Sonia Lott is an expert in prolonged grief that we got to talk to. And Dr. Dominique Rose-Sepowitz is a nationally recognized expert in human trafficking. And both of them highlighted the importance of doing what we need to do to mitigate the effects of experiencing secondhand trauma or burnout. And they both listed a lot of their own hobbies and passions and the things that they engage in between the two of them: energy work, reading more lighthearted material, massages, hobbies, just getting involved in the things that are really meaningful to them. And those two are definitely involved in some heavy work in the community. And so I think it's great to hear how they protect their own energy and they make time for their own self-care as well. Switching gears a little bit, Dr. Alyssa Jared, who we heard from last month, made such a great point. And she said part of her self-care practices include making sure that her blood sugar stays even. And she says she eats throughout the day and makes sure to have snacks. And I thought that was a really important point. We don't always talk about that. I mean, for good reason in some cases, because it's outside of our scope to be making nutrition recommendations, of course, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I was recently going through several days of training that started really early in the morning because it was on East Coast time and I personally am on West Coast time. And I noticed that to just stay engaged and have energy throughout the day in these trainings, I was drinking a lot of caffeine. And so by the end of the final day, I found myself getting really rattled and being dysregulated. Like my reactions to things were more intense. There was a lot going on. When I checked in with myself, I realized that I had had more caffeine probably than any human should or could. But also just from a blood sugar perspective, I felt I was way off. And those are not my typical reactions. And so it was interesting just to take a minute to self-reflect on all of the factors contributing and check in with myself and remedy that problem, and how quickly I noticed regulation start to come back on board. I think about her saying that a lot because I think that's such an important piece of the puzzle to check in with, and one that's often overlooked, especially when we're focused so much on emotional, behavioral regulation. We may not be looking at the entire system. She also gave another tip that I've found myself thinking about and talking about a lot. She talks about the skills that she recommends in her book. She has a set of emotion regulation skills called CARE skills that she says are similar and modified from DBT skills. And one of the techniques she suggests is using a heart rate monitor to help clients track and notice that when their heart rate is increasing from activity, and then how quickly it can decrease by bringing in the emotion regulation skills.
The tip skills, I just transform them. I use a different acronym, CARE. And it's like one of the coolest skills to do with somebody because you can see someone's heart rate reduced by 50% or more within 30 seconds, right? So I have a heart rate monitor and I've brought the heart rate monitor with me. We get their heart rate up. I have them run in place and then they use one of the CARE skills. Oftentimes ice, cool with ice is one that I really, really like. That works really quickly. So they'll use that and we put on the heart rate monitor and we see that heart rate just plummet in a way that it can't do on its own. And so that's just one example where you can actually practice it in the room and the person can see like, oh my gosh, that's wild. That worked so well, so quickly.
So I think that's a really neat thing too, to actually see how your self-care is working and noticing how your heart rate and different physiological measures, how much energy you have, how much sleep you're getting, can shift over time due to different factors that might affect you. I think about that a lot, and I've had different people on my teams implement that one already because it was such a unique and actionable step that we can take for ourselves and our clients. Along the DBT lines, the episode with Dr. Kiki Failing was really great. She's a very skilled and practiced speaker and presenter, and she gives a rundown of a lot of different skills and distress tolerance. She talked about a distress tolerance toolkit, which basically is having all of your different techniques and tools that you use to really calm down and care for yourself in one place. So if you find yourself needing them, you'll be able to access them quickly without thinking, oh, where's this? Where's that? She goes over a lot of DBT skills as well in that episode. And I think that one is a great one to reflect on.
Again, I just want to throw back out there as like a beauty of dialectical philosophy is change is constant. The thing that feels good for you and helpful for you today might not tomorrow, or vice versa. And that's okay. So we get to learn about ourselves. We all live in families and systems and cultures that are constantly changing and impacting us. And it's okay for our limits to change too, and to just like be aware of that, self-explore, communicate that to the loved ones and the people around us who matter and need to know our limits, and recognize that that's a part of us, and that's okay for it to change.
This month, we got to hear from Dr. Hillary Hurst Bush, and you guys know I loved that episode. I think that motivation episode is a great one to reflect on as you and your clients are heading into this new year and potentially thinking about setting some goals and how to maybe tap into some motivation in different areas. I think that one was a great one. And she talks about our capacity and really making room for our capacity and our pleasure as restorative.
Also has to do with having the time to do the thing and clearing one's schedule, or making time in one's schedule and protecting that time so that the practice actually has a chance to happen. Because without that time, the practice probably doesn't get a chance because there are so many competing demands on our time.
And then the crisis intervention episode with Kevin Curtis, where he talks about how restorative it can be to make changes in the system that you're working in so you enjoy working in the system, and how that can have self-care properties too.
We have such limited time on this earth, and there are so many more things that we could put our energy towards than we actually have energy or time to put towards it. When I think about life in that way, I just think about every problem that I need to solve differently. I think about every opportunity differently. And I found the greatest creative expression from a career standpoint in not accepting that a system has to work the way that it works. And if you step back and you say, and you allow yourself to dream, what if this worked differently? What would it look like? What would it take? We just have such limited time. Why do we want to work in systems that don't do what they're supposed to do? Use your limited time to actually change that thing, and let that be your source of creative outlet in the job.
So in summation of those last few themes, I feel the importance of passion in your work and imagining how to tap into your passion and what drives you, how to make time and space for those things. Interestingly for me, every year I go to this craft fair that comes to town, and it gives opportunities to sign up for different classes and try some different hands-on approaches to making things. Last year I did a resin class that was super cool. I've done sewing, I've done painting, I've done crocheting through this, and every year I look forward to it because I feel like I just need to tap into that creativity. It's so important for my self-care, and I don't always have the time set aside, but I make time for this every year. And this year I felt like I didn't even necessarily feel like I had to do it because this podcast has been such a meaningful creative outlet for me. I felt like, oh, I've already been creative this week. I've been creative a lot this week. There's a lot of opportunity around that for me. And so that brings me to a bit of a conclusion. I wanted to take some time to thank you for listening, for liking, for giving me feedback, critical or positive. I learned so much from both, and I'm always open to that. If you go to my website, lorainmoorhead.com/podcast, it has my contact information there. If you have a guest that you would like to hear more from, then make that suggestion there. If there's ever anything that you'd like to, even a formatting thing that you would enjoy to hear more of or less of, I would love to hear that. If you share with a colleague or a student or someone who had a question about one of the topics that we've covered this year, thank you. That stuff helps a lot, I'm finding. And we're growing. Our community is growing all the time. And so I'm thinking about what we need, what we all want to hear about. And the podcast has been a pipe dream for years because, like I mentioned earlier, I love them. I'm not much of a TV watcher or a movie watcher, but if it's a podcast, I'm going to listen to it. I found my initial map recently from 2018 of my original idea for a podcast, and it was going to be called Provoking Thoughts, which I still think is a cute name if anybody needs one. So to be able to say that we've almost got 20 episodes now going into the new year has just been amazing, and I want to thank anybody who's been a part of it. So I hope that this episode has been able to give you some ideas on some of the different values to pull into your self-care so it's truly in alignment. Passion, community, movement, hobbies, internal skills for regulation, meditation, mindfulness skills, and activity, just to name a few. So I'd love to hear more from you about your self-care. And I want to say Happy New Year. Thank you so much for being here. I I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Self Careapist Podcast. If you did, please subscribe and feel free to leave a review. You can also follow along at the Self Careapist on Instagram or head to lorainmoorhead.com/podcast to grab a free copy of your own learning map worksheet to help track all of the tools and strategies you're interested in learning more about. See you next Wednesday.